Hey everyone, Aaron Fleishman here. Craig back again to answer some of your additional questions from the town hall session we did a couple weeks ago. Again, just a quick thank you to Marcus Evans and to everybody who participated in the town hall last week. We had so many questions. We had to do another little mini episode for everybody to get through all of them. But it was great. We wanted everybody to set the agenda, Craig, and everybody did. And we were just there to kind of answer questions. So it was really great.
I thought it worked out really well. I'm looking forward to seeing the questions that we didn't get to. So
Yeah.
let's dig in.
All right, let's go right off the bat. How do you? And again, some of these we sort of answered a little bit last week, but more specific some of these questions. But how do you see the implementation of decentralized trials or telemedicine in other regions such as Latin America?
You know, it's a great question, right? Because things get so regionalized when we're talking about internet prescribing and telemedicine laws. It's fragmented in the U.S. It gets very separated in Europe, and then we have to start to look at these geographies all around the world. Fortunately for the U.S., I think we have some good clarity with the recommendations that the FDA helped put out from the Clinical Trials Transformation Initiative from Citi. And in Europe, we're seeing clarity that I believe will come through the Trials at Home initiative, which is being driven by the IMI, the Innovative Medicines Initiative. But that still leaves a lot of fact-finding and learning that will be required in other geographies to make sure that we understand what the requirements are in Latin America, in different countries in Asia, and the rest of the world. This is where I think taking a near-term view of decentralized methods as compared to focusing on an end-to-end, fully remote decentralized trial is going to help us to get there. Because when we can just break out elements like use of video or other decentralized methods in our studies, it can make it much more accessible for us to answer those local legal questions and help to support local implementation.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think you can start to break it down a little bit on a study-by-study, case-by-case basis a little bit. As an example, we're doing medication delivery for a study in Latin America right now. We were able to learn, as you said, about the regulatory requirements that are associated with that, and find some piece of decentralized trials or some piece of that virtual thing that can work in a study. But and we talked a lot about this at the town hall. It really does start with that sort of needs assessment of, what are the needs of the site? What are the needs of the patients? What are the regulatory requirements by country? And then finding that one piece that you can sort of build upon to help with this specific study that you're working on. So yeah, I agree completely with that.
I will say,
Yeah,
it is hard for organizations to keep track of all the different
it
local,
is.
legal, and regulatory nuances around this space. I think it's hard just for telemedicine in general, and then to apply it in this
Yeah.
space. What I'm really looking forward to are for some vehicles that we can put together that can help us to aggregate and share what countries people have had different experiences in,
Hmm.
to unlock some of those experiences. We have a new a nonprofit initiative will go live later this year that I think will help provide a platform for us to share some of that across the community that's trying to accelerate decentralized trials and research together.
Yeah, and especially now, I mean, just it changes frequently and so quickly all the time, especially around, travel, any kind of travel. It's the regulatory changes are so fast that it's hard. You're right, it is hard to keep up to date with them, and so hopefully some other initiatives can help share those sort of case study like scenarios with people so that they can say, oh, okay, I can build off of that. I can take what's been done already. That feels comfortable to me, and move forward. Um, let's see. The next one. Have you seen a decrease? This is a good one. Have you seen a decrease in the number of healthy volunteers signing up for clinical research trials?
Well, not only has there been a decrease, I don't even know if it's just because of the fewer healthy volunteers signing up. I think when we've looked at what is an essential business, I think healthy volunteer studies in most cases has not been considered essential to be able to keep those studies starting up
Hmm.
and enrolling, as compared with studies that are in a patient population where there is more of an essential impact back to the patient who may be relying on access to that new medicine. So there certainly is a decrease in enrollment overall, and I would believe that it is disproportionately impacting for sure the healthy volunteer studies where they are likely to be considered less essential. Now, as we
Mhm.
unlock the country and we see more and more countries around the world start to open up their doors for some of their non-essential businesses, I think this will be a pretty accessible one to reopen. And I think we're going to find ourselves in one of two situations. Either patients in general are more aware of research participation than ever before. They're seeing it on the news and on their news feeds every day, or will they have trepidation about going into a clinical environment during this time? The good news is those clinical environments can be very well controlled in terms of disease prevention and PPE, protective equipment for
Yeah.
different individuals. So hopefully it will be an overall net gain in terms of the benefit of awareness and participation in those studies.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think the two that stand out to me the most is number one, the news that's around clinical research trials right now and how big that is. And so when people start to be able to get out more and businesses open more and people are ready to kind of get back into the world a little bit more, I guess, you might see an increase in people wanting to participate because they see the value of how these types of studies and how clinical trials can really help further the progression and the understanding of different conditions and treatments for those conditions and things like that. So there could be some good, around that come out of it. And the other thing that I would say is, yes, right now enrollment for studies, healthy volunteers and otherwise, is low, but we're not seeing people who are currently in studies wanting to walk away. They want to still stay in the study and continue on through the study. And that's where, decentralized clinical trial options can really, really help keep people who want to stay involved in the studies that they're in continue on through it. Okay, here we go. What are the biggest concerns for clinicians around remote contact with patients? Is it lower compensation, lack of support by payers? Lots of options here. Lack of familiarity with tech, concern about increased legal liability if a clinical sign is missed. That's a good one. Have you heard really anything, Craig, around some of the bigger concerns that people are having?
Fortunately, the field of telemedicine has been around for a long time, and with very slow adoption until the last 3 months. There are organizations I've talked to that have shared that they've done as many telemedicine visits in the last 2 months that they did in the last 4 or 5 years. And so the tools have been available, and so there have been interesting studies that have looked at the barriers to adoption, why pre-COVID providers and others were simply not taking advantage of the technologies that were available. And right along the lanes of the lines of this particular question, a lot of it come down to the financials. The first two tend to be around the perception of a high cost to implement these tools in a medical practice and the fear of low reimbursement associated with those. So the first two issues being both the upside and the both the cost to them as well as the low perception of revenue, and then that would be followed often by a number of legal concerns, whether it's around liability or security. Today we're in a place where a lot of those issues have been, I don't want to say fully addressed, but a lot of those concerns are being worked through. Right, people are seeing that the cost for implementation is today pretty manageable for many of their practices. And we have seen this anomaly during the pandemic that reimbursement is very good right now for providers that are supporting patients with video visits, but we don't know if that's going to sustain after the pandemic. But then likewise, we've seen that organizations have overcome those perceptions around barriers. Other providers have instead focused to me on the concern that because I can't touch a patient, I'm not going to have the same insights that I need to provide a proper care and proper diagnosis and proper management for that patient. But again, this window in time has given so many providers experience with telemedicine platforms that I think in many cases it's helped them to overcome those fears, not believing that every visit can be replaced by telemedicine, but starting to see for themselves where a video visit can actually be just fine and when a patient would absolutely need to come in. So while there have been a number of barriers, this strange period in our history has given us a lot of opportunity for providers to work through those. And what we'll now have to see is how well this sticks post COVID, because we've really had three policy shifts that have driven increased adoption among providers. They dropped the interstate barriers to seeing patients, that a physician licensed in New Jersey couldn't see a patient in New York. They
Okay.
dropped a lot of the privacy requirements on the platforms, and they improved the reimbursement. And we don't know if all three of those will stick, and we don't know which ones will necessarily be critical for providers to keep using these platforms.
Yeah, I mean, everything is an asset and a liability, right? I mean, there's so many positives and negatives to all of it. I think all of those concerns are probably, valid in the varying degrees by physician, by site, which one's more of a concern than the other. But I think, like, look, telehealth obviously allows access to immediacy, right? You can get in touch with your doctor. You don't have to travel to go into the doctor's office. So there is, some nice part to that. Can we complement it with other tactics? So is it a video visit plus a wearable, right? So it's not only just that you're talking to the doctor, but you're also reading some sort of data from something else that can kind of help with that diagnosis piece of it. Can we complement the two of them together? Might be a way to do it. But again, everything is an asset and a liability. I firmly believe there's nothing that beats the one-to-one, the face-to-face between a patient and a doctor. I don't know that there ever will be that opportunity. So yes, we're missing a little bit there, not just from the clinician side, but from the patient side as well. But to your point, there are times where a simple call, a simple telehealth visit, will suffice and we'll be okay. And people, and again, I had my telehealth visit a couple weeks ago. It was really simple, it was really easy, and it was convenient. And my doctor and I both got something out of it. So I think, yes, that is part of it as well.
You can go into Best Buy today and pick up enough supplies to support a pretty good telehealth visit of the future today.
Right.
There are kits from companies like Taito and others that let you be able to capture a range of physical exam and diagnostic data to be able to share with a provider over a telemedicine visit. And so to your point, Aaron, it really paints the picture that in the future, that little black bag that doctors used to carry for house calls back in the Marcus Welby days.
Yeah, right.
We're all going to have that little black bag in our house. And when the kids are sick or someone else just needs that kind of check we can't get into the provider, that the use of video supplemented by our own little black bag opening up to share diagnostic data during the interaction can be a very reasonable proxy for many visits.
Yeah. Uh, all right. How can we advance the field of decentralized trials and not leave behind people without access to reliable internet, electronic devices, or in general, just, digital savvy, tech savviness?
Oh boy, that's a great question, because the promise, one of the main reasons for doing these trials in the first place and with these approaches, is to open up access and to make trial
Hmm.
participation accessible for more, not to take away access for any. So I think piece number one to me is to always try to think about how these tools become hybridized options for patients and not dependencies for participation. But the second piece of good news for me is that we have a long history of provisioning technology. In fact, we've only in recent years been able to shift from entirely provisioning tech for patients and allowing patients to use their own device.
Hmm.
Right. So the legacy, the traditional approach for us has always been, we're going to buy gadgets and support connectivity and hand them out to patients. And it's only in recent years that we've said, well, if a patient has a device that they would like to use, they can use that instead. But the future for us needs to be allowing patients to use their own technology where it's feasible, but always making sure we're prepared to provision devices and support access for those who don't have it. The costs today only continue to drop in terms of the cost for technology as well as internet access, making that less of a barrier for
Mhm.
study sponsors to be able to support.
Yeah, I remember actually a few years ago. I don't know if you remember this, but I saw you at Scope, and it was just after a presentation where it was this whole big debate between uh, provision device versus bring your own device, and which was the way to go and which one was better. Yeah, the ever battle. And you and I have questions like, well, can it be both? Can't the patient have the option? Can't there be something that just provides them? How would you like to participate? What would make it easy for you as the patient, as the participant, to do this? Would you like something? And so I agree. That this is we can kind of fall back a little bit back on that debate, and come back to the idea of, here, I'm going to give you something, whether it be a hotspot, whether it be a specific device. I mean, those kinds of options are available.
We've heard for years the different reasons for why, right? That we need to standardize the devices that patients use because they won't know to scroll down if the question
Yeah.
renders a certain way on their phone and they only see, two multiple choice options instead of four. But then we see the other data, right? That we as consumers are unlocking and using our phone literally thousands of times a day, and so we kind of know how to scroll and interact with our own technology. Today,
Yeah.
the variability, the risk is by throwing something unfamiliar in our hands that we don't know how to interface with, as compared to letting us use the device and the screen that we're
Hmm.
interacting with constantly. But we never want that to be a barrier. And so the other myth to me is, well, by using a BYOD approach, we're going to leave patients behind. Nobody, if today we're comfortable provisioning devices, why would we stop that and leave patients behind? That would just seem crazy to me.
Yeah. Right. I agree. Um, okay. Here's a good one for you. Validating new digital endpoints to enable decentralized trials can be a very good resource, but also time sensitive. What are options for cost sharing across sponsors and regulatory agencies, so on and so forth?
So it is a very good point because we need new endpoints. The fragility of these endpoints that we're relying on today that make patients have to go in the clinic to have an exam or to have a provider watch somebody walk for 6 minutes just to capture the endpoint that we need is just not sustainable. But we can't switch an endpoint overnight. It requires time and it requires an investment to be made. I think the nature of this question is a good one, which is this investment is actually one that's really conducive for shared risk. No endpoint should be owned by one pharma company. I don't think any pharma company wants to own an endpoint today. If we're investing in an endpoint to be validated, it's in all of our interests for it to be widely used and familiar to regulators, payers, providers, researchers, and patients themselves. We want people to see this endpoint and be comfortable with it, not to have it be a one-off that's isolated in a warehouse at some pharma company and locked away from others to be able to use. So what works out well today, I believe, are for models that organizations can share that investment and work on that together. So the sharing to me can either be multiple sponsors working together to reduce risk, or both developing portfolios in Parkinson's. Let's both share data and information that can help accelerate new endpoints in a given disease area, or for sponsors to partner with technology companies and try to share risk in that way so that the technology partner can help reuse and amplify the measurement once it's been generated. But either way, time needs to be allocated. This is a process that needs to be in the clinical development plan for that molecule. It can't just be written in the protocol and expect somebody to whip up a new endpoint right away. The clinical development plan that defines up front the different studies that are going to be taken with that molecule on its journey, on its lifetime, that's where we need to make sure we're capturing what new endpoint needs to start development work and when.
Yep. And the final question that we have here, Craig, is how do you envision telemedicine and other decentralized trial approaches impacting monitoring and SDV? And maybe just share what SDV means for everybody
Right.
in case
So,
they don't know.
great question, and this is a great question that we're still really even learning about. The role of a monitor and the work that a monitor often does on site, SDV or source data verification, um, that work is changed in a decentralized trial. We're not sending monitors into patients' homes to monitor data. In most cases, when we're using a remote or decentralized approach, more and more of our data is actually being electronically sourced, either through patient self-reporting or through diagnostic devices that may go into the patient's home. Sometimes there's still other types of data that could be sourced, and so there still is some place of SDV, sort of data verification. But a lot of that changes in a world where data is electronically sourced, and we already know that. We know that when we talk about electronic health record data flowing into study databases, that the role of the monitor is changing. And so certainly it will continue to change and evolve here. I think in many ways we're still learning about that. And in many ways it's converging with risk-based monitoring and new models that we're standing up that can better use data around the study to help inform where there's the most risk and where monitoring efforts need to be doubled down. But this as well to me is an area that some increased collaboration and sharing would serve us all well to help us to collectively understand the best practices for monitoring in a world with increased decentralization in our trials.
I agree. All right. Well, those are the questions. Bang those up pretty quickly. Nice job. So again, thanks so much to Craig. Thanks so much to Marcus Evans. Thanks so much for all of you who really made this town hall an extended town hall what it could be. You guys set the agenda. Hopefully, we answered things well.
And
And
thank you, Aaron, for bringing us all together, because that's what it takes, right? Is to catalyze this as a community to come together to share our
absolutely.
questions and share that learning. Thanks, Aaron.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thanks so much. You can find all of this information on BBK's website, innovations.bbkworldwide.com. There's a comment section. So if you have more questions, feel free to answer them. Agree or disagree with anything Craig and I said, fire away. We'll get back to you, and we'll try to keep the conversation as much as we can going on. So thanks again to everybody.